trying to make it all happy.
Lisa, you're always socializing the longest. That's those attorneys. They know how to speak. Out there. Are we back on, Jake?
Yep.
Okay, our next item is item 7, discuss staff recommendations for SIOC repair program for fiscal year 2019. And I think we have Mackenzie Wood here and Randy Randall and Mark Marchant. I was teasing Mackenzie this morning that we were going to have a big crowd for her tonight and be all exciting, but like you get at a Utah football game. But now it's probably like a BYU football game. They'll probably get a crowd now.
You see that in your game, careful.
So Mackenzie, take it away.
Well, let me just note, Mayor, first, this is the team, these three, who have been working on this subject for the last couple of months. And it's a big subject. We have a recommendation for you. This won't end the work. This begins the work, but this is a recommendation that we hope will allow us to go forward in the current year, and that while you continue to develop policy for the future. Take it away, Mackenzie.
Hey, do I need to do anything specific before I start talking?
Name
Just lower
and
the
where
mic
you're
a
from.
little bit so we
Okay, I'm Mackenzie Wood. I'm the city recorder. This doesn't fall in that category.
But you know why she's involved, right? You remember she did the...
Yes.
Okay.
She did the initial work.
Right.
She's good at counting trees.
I'm very good at counting trees. Okay, so if you have the
Put up the...
handout, the discussion outline, if you looked at that,
Discussion
we're just
outline.
going to go through that. I won't read all of it, just some highlights from that. A quick review of the survey that I did in 2016. As of all the sidewalks and street trees in Centerville, there were 8,049 vertical faults inventoried at that time, and 1,746 trees in the park strip. One of the things we analyzed was to see if those faults were near trees, and 2,037 vertical faults were within a specified tree buffer of 15 feet. So there's that. There's some more statistics that I put in there of how many faults per fault category. But the main result of that was faults occur 1.15 times more within 15 feet of a park strip tree, which is why we're here.
Well, the 1.15 is not so significant as the
No.
3.4, though, right?
Right. So, yeah, major faults occur 3.4 times more likely near a tree. And
Major faults being the over 3 inches.
Over 1 inch.
Over 1 inch, okay.
Yeah, any fault over 1 inch was considered a major fault. And after the inventory, there were 8 faults over 3 inches, and those have all been taken care of since then. So those are good. Mark and I...
You said they're all taken care of?
Those 8 over 3 inches had all been...
I thought I had a 3-inch next.
But we have a few more that have become 3-inch or more
There are
since
more.
then.
So this summer, Mark and I went and reviewed the faults that were 1 inch or greater from the 2016 inventory. There were 405 of those listed. So we went and checked all of those. We didn't do as thorough of an inventory as was
Can
done
I
in
ask for a
2016.
clarification? I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. So the major faults occurring 3.4 times more often, can you explain the math to me if there are 405 1 to 3 inch faults and 50% are within the tree buffer and 50% are without?
Are you looking under updates?
Yeah.
Okay, so those, let's see. So earlier in the 2016, there's the 51% of 1 to 3 inch faults happen within the tree buffer.
Mhm.
And that's fairly consistent with the 202 within the tree buffer that we checked this year versus the 203 outside of the buffer. I'm not sure if the math is exact on that.
So the major, I'm thinking the major faults that is 3.4 times more
Right.
likely is the 3 inches and above.
I'm not sure. I haven't gone back and read
Because
that whole
if it's
report.
50% and 50% within tree buffer and outside of tree buffer, I'm not
Right.
understanding.
That included those 8. That number, the 3.4, included the 8 originally in the 2016.
Right, that's what I was asking for clarification on, and Steve's answer was that 3.4 times more likely included.
Then it might have been just the 3-inch
I
faults.
think it was just the
Okay.
over 3.
I'd
So
have to go
we're just
back and
talking about
reread it.
8 faults on that number.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Each of those 8 faults was within
Yes.
15 feet of a tree. So, to the updates, Mark and I found that at least 37 of those greater than 1-inch faults, as they were categorized in 2016, have increased from what they were. And a few, we aren't sure how many, a handful, not more than 10 that we saw, have increased over the 3-inch height. What we found was the worst in the 2016 survey. So, of those 405 faults that we looked at, there are 176 trees near to them, 76 of which are small enough that they would be removable by the Parks Department or the Public Works Department, maybe the Parks Department as well. But let's see. What we wanted to recommend tonight is a process to go forward to repair the faults, to use that budget that is in the 2018-2019 fiscal year budget. There are 405 faults over 1 inch, and those are a major liability. They are a liability to the city. So we would like to start with those faults that are over 1 inch. We would like to start with those that are near those 176 trees. So the recommendation is that we create a cost-sharing program that if the property owners who have a fault over 1 inch near a tree, if they are willing to participate in the program, we would remove that tree before we repair the sidewalk. And then on that back page, on the second page, yeah, good, you're there. Under the bullet point of a cost-sharing program, any fault over 1 inch, the city would cover 100% of the repair costs. If the fault is between 1/2 inch and 1 inch, the city would cover 50% of that cost. And then 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch, the city would cover 25%. And anything less than 3/8 of an inch or spalling or cracking would be considered cosmetic, and the property owner would cover 100%.
Let me clarify, Mackenzie, right here. Initially, we're talking about the sites that are over 1 inch on faults, and if they have other faults along the same frontage, is where the cost.
What we want to do is we
Sharon
want to
comes
deal with the people once. We want to deal with each property owner and give them an opportunity to fix their entire frontage, and we would participate with them if they want to. That way, it's their decision. We'd rather deal with them one time, and that's what we did with the larger trees as well. It works out a lot better to clean up their entire yard and do their frontage. Some, for example, are you done? When we get to it, we'll talk about a scenario after she gets done.
Yeah, let her
Right.
go ahead. then.
Randy has a map to show us later. So that's the general idea of how we would break down the cost sharing. But we would want to start with those faults, major faults near trees, and to, if the property owner is willing, remove that tree so that it can't increase. Because several of the faults, like I said, 37 have increased in size since 2016. And then, yeah, so we want to prioritize those faults and give those property owners a chance to request removal of their tree, repair of their sidewalks. And yeah, as part of that, in discussion, we talked about just removing park strip trees, not removing trees that are on the property owner's side of the sidewalk for liability issues, just deal with those trees within the public space. But also having the property owner be responsible for the cleanup, the re-beautification of their park strip after.
Can I get a clarification on the removal of tree? Are we talking about stumping it, or are we talking about full removal, including root system?
Full removal, including root system.
Okay.
One thing we would do too is we'd send letters to everybody telling them of the program, and then we'd have them call in, and then we'd go out and meet with them, give them the price of what we'd pay, what they'd have to pay, and whether they want to do part or all of it. For example, they may say, oh, we just want the biggest tree taken down. We'd take down anything that's 1 inch or greater and repair it. But if they want more concrete, then we'd make up a list of what people want to do, and then we'd wait a couple weeks, and then we'd be able to determine how much money we have and start moving forward with the program.
Randy, when you say we would notify people, that we're targeting the 176
Yes.
cases,
With 1 inch or greater.
1 inch or greater, that also have trees associated with them. Those are the ones we would send the initial notice to, an invitation to participate.
But only if the tree is in the park strip.
Yes.
Correct.
And
Well, if they
there's a-
had one
if
that's
there's a-
not, then we would let them take their tree down. And if they had trees and they took it down, yes, we would take care of even one that's,
If-
they'd take their own down.
So
If
the
they
only
took-
difference is that you won't pay to take the tree down
Correct.
if it's on their property.
Right, but we would fix the sidewalk.
And if you don't take the tree down, then they need to replace it all at their cost.
Well, we wouldn't do that
That's another
sidewalk
policy we've
repair.
gotta- That's the next policy we're gonna talk about later. We wanna first get people's cooperation. We believe that there are people, we've had people that have called us and said, we'd like to have this tree taken down, we'd like to have the sidewalks fixed, we'd like to participate in some of these things. So we thought, first of all, let's allow people to express their desire to have things fixed, and then we would move forward, so.
So at 405 on $100,000, that's, if I'm doing my math right,
It'd take all of the money,
200, is that $250 or $2,500 a spot? 250, isn't it?
well, just for the taking it out, you're paying $1,000 on average for the trees, so.
So where my question was going is, how many of the 176 can you cover with $100,000, would you guess?
Roughly
Half of them.
We have estimated that there's about 100 of the 176 that would be taken out by a contractor. And Mark, was it you that talked to the tree contractor?
Yes.
Just to get an average price
It was 1,000.
of $1,000 per tree. So if you had a,
It's cut down and the stump ground.
So that's
so,
the $100,000 right there.
Yes.
yes.
But we don't think all of them will be involved, so we think we can probably take some down and do some concrete removal as well.
Well, and the other thing is, you send the letter out in
Yeah.
February, let's say.
Well, we're looking at sending out
Now,
sooner. If you
soon.
guys agree to it, we'd just soon get going on it right now, get the trees out this fall. We can take them down in the winter, and then maybe in the spring, we put the sidewalks back in.
Well, where I was going with the comment is, in theory, although we can't make any commitments, the $100,000 is in the budget again next year,
Yes, it could be
which
in the budget.
means that we maybe get all of that by the end of next summer, by the end of the season next year.
Yeah, I think this is good because we'll have people continually knowing that we're doing something and want to get onto the program. The question of it is going to be whether they feel this is enough incentive for them to do the smaller ones. We're concerned that there's a lot of concrete out there that's cosmetic. Are we ready to go on?
Yeah,
to maybe
go
what
to
I
the
want to
map.
talk about? Bring up the next slide that talks about a scenario. This happens to be one who has requested some participation, and what we're trying to do is develop something where that's cosmetic, that is spalding or split sidewalk that doesn't have a displacement, we would not pay anything for that, but we would pay for 50% of the cost for anything a half inch to an inch, and anything over an inch we'd pay for the total thing. So this is a person that's requested, and he has, each one of those represent issues that he has on his sidewalks that he could ask for. The blue, for example, that's a 50% cost we'd pay for. The pink is all cracks, and then the red is 100% we'd pay for, because that's a 1 inch, and the yellow, it represents spalding. So we're saying that the spalding and the cracking has nothing to do from a safety standpoint with our insurers. So we're saying we wouldn't want to participate at this time with those type until we get maybe down to a point where the city's pretty well cleaned up from the hazardous.
But if he, can we do it cheaper than he can? Is our
Well,
price
we'd
better
even
than
have
his?
them do it. We've done that before, if he wants to do it.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, okay, this is me, I have these things.
He doesn't have any trees, by the way.
Right.
I was gonna point that out. How does he even get priority in this?
Just Rick.
Well,
Defoliated
He
the
asked
majority
and
of the
is,
budget.
and
Well, no,
he's
what-
got
what I'm
one that's
saying
up.
Is it, sorry, I'm
Okay.
gonna need to cut you off. Once you continue, I'll come back to
Yeah,
this.
that's right.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
My issue is how do we proportion out and allocate so that we're not only doing the park strip trees, but if there are other areas like this theoretically wouldn't get covered at all under the first go
Well,
if we're
no,
spending
that's
all
not
those
necessarily.
trees,
If we
right?
don't get enough people for the trees, and we had somebody like this, and we still have money available, we would even go to people like this.
But that's the if, though.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the if. First,
Right.
But-
first priority is getting rid of the trees and getting the sidewalks that are over an inch.
Okay,
Yes.
but
Well, go ahead, Ken.
that's my major question, because I am confused why the first priority is getting rid of the trees when we have data here that says 1 to 3 inch faults, half are within tree buffer and half are outside of tree buffer. So if we can't, I mean, being a social scientist and understanding research methodology, I cannot wrap my mind around with those numbers how we came to the conclusion that we know trees are the problem and our number one priority is to get rid of trees.
Well, we're asking the citizens if they think it is. That's why we're going to.
Right, but we're leading the citizens to that by approaching those with trees and saying, we will pay to remove your tree to fix your sidewalk crack. I just feel uncomfortable. I feel like the research methodology on this is leaping to conclusions that the data is not necessarily supporting, and I'd like to have.
Let me respond to that, Tammy. I would question also what your assumption is. You're saying that if you have 405 faults over an inch and half of them are within tree buffers and half aren't, then that means the trees aren't causing them any greater than where there's not trees. But that's a faulty way of looking at it, because your 200 and something that aren't within tree buffers represent a greater distance in which they are located. Those that are associated with tree buffers are within 15 feet. And yet you've got larger extenses of park strip without trees that have the 200 and something cracks. So to say that a tree doesn't create a vertical fault any greater than without a tree, that's not a fair way of looking at the data.
And so are you saying that we have data that says way less than 50% of the city's park strips have trees in them? Or way less, because what I get what you're saying, I think, but what that is assuming is that way less than 50% of our residents do not have a tree within 15 feet of a sidewalk. And I would argue that 15 feet is a long ways into a yard. And so whether it's a park strip tree or a yard tree, this was a wide buffer that we measured. And so to know whether or not your statement is true, because I understand your point, we would have to be counting the number of houses in the city that have this possibility because there's a tree within 15 feet of the sidewalk.
Well, you'd also have to know whether there were trees there before that have already been taken out and the fault is still there.
Yeah, like 1500 North and just west of Main Street, you don't have any of them exceed an inch. But every one of the trees, we've taken and replaced all the sidewalk, or we've ground all the sidewalk. So what she took as far as information is incorrect in that it looks better than it really is. That entire street has been changed by either grinding and replacing. And what's interesting about when they went out again the sidewalks we looked at, even these sidewalks are greater than they were originally. And some of the trees, they had trees in front of their home earlier, this whole subdivision did. And we've seen a growing need after 2 years of her doing the study. The trees are getting worse, or the sidewalks are getting worse. In fact, the ones on 1700 North that she didn't classify as needing repair do need repair. And the ones in front of my house, my neighbor's house on both sides of me, have grown from a ½ inch to an inch. So we haven't restudied everything, and we really didn't do a study that was as comprehensive to say that trees are more of a factor. I think we could go out and restudy and reclassify and say every grinding or every replacement is more than what we've talked about. So we've walked a lot of the streets, and trees are really causing a lot of problems. In fact, on Casaloma, for example, we did the whole street and we replaced the sidewalks, and the trees are as big around as between the curb and gutter, and they've raised again. And so, but they're still less than an inch on that one, and it's only been 2 or 3 years. So the trees just keep growing and keep raising the sidewalks, and we're trying to get a handle on it. And there are a lot of citizens that are saying our trees are too old, we want to get rid of them, and we just think it's a great way to clean up the park strip. So
I guess 2 comments. Number one, I have a family member suffering from COPD, and the absence or reduction of trees in our city will cause air quality to deteriorate. That person can tell the difference between my front yard and my backyard because of the difference in trees in that person's ability to breathe. And while I've seen, the demonstrations, I am concerned, I recognize the problem. We have other problems as well, and the trees are a substantial asset, both in air quality and in beauty. Number 2, on 4th East at about 950 North.
Bill, could you
On
speak
4th
into your
East
mic?
at about 950 North, there is a tree which is reputed to be the oldest tree in Centerville. You know which one it is when I'm talking about, that was substantially cut down? On the east side. That tree is 3 feet in diameter,
yeah.
more or less, and the sidewalk is just as flat as can be. So I'm not saying the conclusions are wrong, but I'm inclined to agree with Tammy's comment that let's not rush to tear trees out, because in many ways we will regret it.
I'm willing to accept the causal relationship between a tree and sidewalks. The evidence is there for me. My issue is, how much can we stretch the money to fix? Because if I could get every one of these faults between 1 and 3 inches fixed this year without taking out a single tree, because I could spread that money, I would do that. My concern is I don't want to throw all of the money into defoliation and not have enough to fix a wider expanse of problems. I am in agreement with you that there are definitely some places where the trees are going to be a problem. I also think that in those particular cases, because of the size and the age and the canopy of those trees, that the homeowner is going to tell us, no way is that tree going anywhere. I would be surprised if we have a ton who are going to say, take it out, because it provides wonderful shade and everything else. I'm not opposed to asking residents, but I'm not necessarily willing to give priority to that over all of the faults. Because I'd like to get as much possible as we could in the range.
Especially where we haven't yet thoroughly examined the other possibilities, because don't get me wrong, I absolutely am in favor of tackling the sidewalk crack issue. But I also know that there are many cities out there in the United States that prioritize trees and figure out how to work sidewalks around them. And so my concern about this recommendation is that it is a statement saying trees are the problem, and so to fix the problem, we will get rid of the trees.
What I was just going to say, I think you have to pair this with a responsible park strip tree ordinance.
Yes.
Now, we have one, but obviously this type of tree is not appropriate for that size park strip. So, you know, proactively, you need to say, for this size park strip, maybe you don't have trees at all, but for 3 feet, there are certainly trees that fit in a 3-foot park strip with planting standards. And then there's trees that fit in 4 foot, and there's trees that require 8 foot. So I think that we need to look at that as well, so that we're not perpetuating the problem.
Well, I think your tree experts that we've talked to, though, think a 4-foot park strip is too small for practically any tree.
Any 4 foot.
Well, and I live in Salt Lake, and I know they made that comment, but they have a forestry program, and they're planting new trees in 4-foot park strips all the time. It has to be the right kind of tree, and it has to be
Yep.
planted properly, and that space allocated for it, not space over a water line or over, you know.
Straddling all the utilities.
Straddling utilities. I'm just saying that it needs to be paired with that type of policy. And I think that you want that policy sooner rather than later, so that you can use it while you're analyzing which trees have to be ripped out and which trees don't.
Right.
To just assume every tree near a sidewalk has to be ripped out. Maybe it's an appropriate tree for that size.
And Lisa, I look at this picture and I see, yeah, this tree is not appropriate for that, what is it, 4-foot
that's an
park
easy
strip,
one.
say. But there are trees.
And even that park strip's easy. I'd say probably our policy would be no trees in a 2-foot park strip. We don't even design 2-foot park strips anymore.
Yeah, there are trees
We don't
that
allow
fit
these
in a
because we
park
know
strip,
it
like you
can't
said.
support the landscaping. So this is, but, we have to deal with this older, but we do not allow this in new developments anymore. Just
Right,
because
but then in dealing with the older ones, to Bill's point, and to Bruce's point that he made earlier tonight about the cemetery, well, that tree is so old that you can place your thing next to it because it's done growing, And so to take the most valuable aged trees that have grown to their full size and are not going to cause the problem anymore. I want to have it be open. I want to do the fund sharing. I want homeowners to be able to let us know that they want to participate in fixing their sidewalks. I want to be careful that we're not sending the message that we don't value trees, and I just feel like we have a more thorough process to go through before we do that aggressive of a statement about the trees. That's just the point I want to
I do think that there are definitely, like this example tree that is completely inappropriate for the area. My gut tells me that's not $1,000 removal. That one's going to include some infrastructure repairs underneath. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but based on some of the things some of your examples you've shown us with the roots growing over utilities and everything like that, are we really looking at some of these trees as this is a $5,000 or a $10,000 tree? Or that's my concern, is if we pick the first 20 residents who have trees like this, do we just blow the entire budget on utilities repairs and the tree removal? I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Because you've torn down more trees than me, so.
Yeah, well, we've torn down some. We had some as high as $3,500 in the last go-around. So I don't think you're going to have as many of the expensive trees. And we want to take out trees. We want people to come to us and say, we would like them. We've had a lot of people that may not have trees that are raising sidewalks, but they want them taken out. 2 weeks ago, I went to an individual's home, and he says, I have 3 trees out here, and I don't want them anymore. And the crazy thing about it was, his trees were fairly nice, but the ones he had on his property, we couldn't even walk down the sidewalk because they were hanging out over the sidewalk from his property. And I said, you need to cut those back. So we're really looking at people, what they want. And if they don't want the trees, we'll take out other sidewalk like this. We'd be glad to work with the people. But we think it's important for us to start removing the trees that people don't want, or the trees that are causing the one its faults, if that's where it is, if we're going to take it out. And then if they have other faults on the property that may not be even tree related, which these are not now, we would go ahead and do some of those. So I don't see it being harsh in any way. I think the citizens, we're just going to say, if you've got those faults, you've got the faults, you've got the trees, we'd like to take the trees out, and if they say, no, we don't want it, then we'll just move on to somebody else.
Well, I'm not looking at it as harsh. I'm looking at it as a cost benefit, because we take that, can you show that example tree that's inappropriate for the park strip? It's the thickest.
The first one there.
That one. So let's just say, for example, that property owner goes, whew, that's city's gonna take that out for free. I'm gonna say I'm done with that tree. And that tree plus the utilities damage is $6,000. I'm just throwing out a number, because you throw out 3,500, I don't know if that includes utilities or if that's just the tree.
No, we didn't do any utilities.
So let's assume, just for discussion purposes, that tree is a $6,000 tree. How many 1-inch cracks could I have fixed in other areas of the city for the same amount of money? That's the math I'm doing in my head. I'm not saying that is an ideal situation, but I'm concerned about giving preferential treatment in that regard, because it's a great benefit. If I have 2 trees that were in my park strip when I got there, I'm indifferent to them. If somebody else took them out, that's a bonus. But I would prefer to see that same money go towards more fixes.
So are you suggesting then that they have to take the tree out? Do we go after them to make them take that tree out? That tree is 6 inches, raised the sidewalk up 6 inches, and she didn't put it down as a fault because the sidewalk's like this, and we've ground it to match it. So are we just gonna spend more money to follow the tree as it keeps rising?
Well, that goes back to that
poll.
poll.
Is save that tree for a year or two, take care of more problems right now, and then in the future, when there's not as many priorities, go back to that one, as I think what he said.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, because if we do, and I like Lisa's recommendation about making sure that you have your policy to go with it, that tree in a future iteration of the council, I think you, and I'm not saying just this council, but in a future time period, that tree would probably come down by ordinance, because it should not be there. But I don't know that I'd necessarily want to spend the available funds to tackle that one this year, because there is the broader policy question of, are you going to allow anything? We already know that, as you know, that we're looking at water restrictions in the future. Part of that policy discussion to me is, if you're tearing out the trees, are you going to allow xeriscaping instead of a park strip due to water restrictions that are upcoming? So I'd like to be all together on that as one, and the available money now, let's fix as much as we can. And if there's 1 or 2 of these that we identify that are really high risk, deal with them, but I'm not sure that I'd want to spend the money directly towards the tree removal as the initial step.
So are you saying that you would allow us to go in and not, if there's a tree, for example, that one, would you want us to take the sidewalk out and fix it? Our policy would be, we're not gonna fix anything that has a tree that is causing the problem. That's always been
So maybe,
our policy.
I would totally agree with that. I don't think we should be fixing the trees where, if the tree's still there, we don't want to fix the sidewalk.
That's my point, yeah.
That would be my point. My other point too
There's
is,
no question about that.
Well,
with
that's
what-
what that one is, that one for sure.
with what Tammy's saying, I love trees. I wished I had 100 more in my yard. But, so when Bill says the relative is so much better in the backyard where there's more trees, we're not limiting the trees you can put on your backyard or your front yard. We're not going to do away with trees. We're going to do trees in a better spot. So if we take these down in the park strip, they're more than welcome to go 10 feet or whatever you decide needs to be behind the sidewalk and plant 15 more trees if they want. So, and I think we should encourage that, not financially. I don't think we need to give money to people for their trees, but I think it's great. And, you know, give them, you know, maybe even if we have an arborist come once a year and talk to people and help people learn what and where in their yards to plant trees. But I don't think we want to plant it in the park strip where they're not only ruining the sidewalk, but they're ruining all of our infrastructure. And I don't think there's places that there isn't infrastructure down underneath. I mean, Lisa's saying, well, we're not going to do it. Well, that's what the park strip was for, is
It's full of
infrastructure. It was not ever meant for trees. It was meant for infrastructure highway. And so I think we need to pull our trees out of the infrastructure highway, put them back in people's yards. So we have just as many trees, but we don't have them on the sidewalk. Me being over on Main Street, the chief was over there today. There's trees going along the back of those houses over there. You can't see the school sign. And I don't care how much they cut them back, which they don't. You can't. So I have people stop and tell me once or twice a week, I couldn't see the lights. Nope, you couldn't, and you just came by here at 45 miles an hour and I was standing there. But.
And you've never done it before and you have no idea that we're here.
No, but you can't. I mean, I had an old lady today stop and say to me, you can't see that light until you're beyond those 3 trees. And then there was one right across from where I stand, which was impeding the school zone sign. So when they try to get tickets, they're fighting them because they're going, we can't see them. So I think that is a problem. And even not only with the sidewalks, the infrastructure, you walk down the sidewalk and you're getting the trees in your face and in your, because nobody, I mean, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few people keep them trimmed up high enough, keep them trimmed up in enough. The mail trucks have a terrible time. They break off their mirrors, they break out their windshields because they're trying to go down the side of the road and they're hitting those trees. So I say let's get a ton of trees in Centerville, but let's do it back in the yard, not out in the park strip where we need our infrastructure, because that's why we designed park strips, was for somewhere to put our infrastructure.
There's another discussion to be had too. Trees frame a street as far as how the houses look. And when we have a work session before this meeting about value of homes, there are people that drive through a neighborhood and based on how the landscaping and how trees have laid out, they say, I want to buy there. They worry about that first before they even know who's living in the neighborhoods. And so that's an important aspect, that we have a good policy defined before we just go hacking at any tree when you're looking at value that you're creating for your residents as well too with your homes and your businesses. We've seen a presentation on the framing of streets and main streets in our business areas with the landscaping, and that becomes an important consideration as well too.
It does, but it's nice to have thought that through and decided on it before we decided where the infrastructure would be. And since the infrastructure is already in the park strip, it's a lot cheaper to move a tree behind the sidewalk and plant a new one. I mean, take one out and plant one behind the sidewalk than it is to pick up all the lines that are in the park strip and move them.
Well, and if you look like up here at the elementary school, it's lined with trees. It's gorgeous. It's just a line behind the sidewalk, not a line out on the street where you can't see where you're going or the street signs or anything else. I think you're absolutely right. And I think maybe as a city, if we get an arborist to come in and like you said, it can make a difference in the price of a home. And sometimes I don't know where to plant the trees.
Well,
But if we had somebody coming in and helping people know where to design the trees and what kind of trees to plant where, we might get more trees in the city than we have now, but we're not going to be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace our infrastructure, sidewalks, and the infrastructure under the sidewalks.
Well, to Randy's point, this is a voluntary program. It's the way that you're presenting that. But my initial, if I were writing a check for this, I would say, cast your net, see how many people are interested in this, prioritize the top ones that are absolutely in this category, but limit that expenditure to no more than 20% of the budget. Bring us Casaloma deals all day long, and that money will go really far. That would be my suggestion, is because we still have the policy issue. If they want to take that tree out today, they could go do that. And
We could take any of the trees out in the park.
Right, well, or the owner could do it as well.
Though, I mean, we have the right, in fact, for safety or whatever it might be, we still want to get a policy that everybody's on the same page, so.
But we do have an ordinance in place, and we do have a tree list, an approved tree list, but only a few people a year even call and want to know what the tree list is, or if they are on a corner, if there's site triangle measurements and distances. People don't know.
Well, most of the trees that are problematic are predate the ordinance.
Yes.
Now, George, are you suggesting that most of the money should be spent in this budget for the cracks over 1 inch where there are not trees? Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
I am saying that. I think we'll get more mileage out of the money by doing that, because I don't know what these are going to cost. I am not saying don't take care of some of these, but prioritize. We don't even know how many people are going to say yes.
What he's saying is that going his direction will maybe fix 200 1-inchers rather than 100 1-inchers.
And I agree with that, because the thing that's making me uncomfortable is this is a little bit cart before the horse, where we haven't thoroughly had the sidewalk. Is it sidewalk versus trees, or is it sidewalk and trees?
No, it's infrastructure versus trees.
Is there technology? Are there other options? I think that that's all going to be part of our research in the more thorough discussion. And so I would absolutely lean towards, for this temporary period of time where we do want to be tackling the problem and we've set aside the money, the clearer route for me is tackle the spots without the trees, because the trees are the complicated question that we need a lot more information on before I feel comfortable saying, let's tear out the trees.
So you'd like us to send out letters then that would say, we're not going to go in areas where you may have a tree, but we will take care of your sidewalks where you do have trees. I mean, would you want to be proactive that way?
Yeah, and then
as opposed to the other way and see how many people are interested?
And then if the homeowner has trees, but they really want them out anyway and are willing to take them out themselves and say, now you come pay for the sidewalk, because I wanted the trees out enough that I'll take them out, but I don't feel like you're incentivizing me as a city to do it. But then it would be very clear. Like you could say, if you're willing to remove the trees yourself because we're concerned they'll cause future problems, then we will come do the cost sharing or the paying for the repair.
What about the ones that they can take out down themselves? They can do half of them by themselves without it really being super expensive. So if
so
you
it's just
could,
that twist, yeah.
if you could take the ones down that we can take down with our own equipment and our own manpower, they're not going to be $1,000 a tree. And so I would like to see some of those. And my other question was, so when I have a sidewalk in front of my house, like we showed up there, can you buy the concrete and do the sidewalk cheaper than I can?
Can we?
Yes.
Yes, especially because we can do it more at a time.
Okay, so
You
that's
buy a
what I'm
whole
saying.
truckload.
So maybe I have a 1 inch and a 3 inch, and then I have a little over here that's not very much. So I still am gonna fix this because you'll let me do it at your cost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to be very responsible that way and say to people, you know, we'll pass on our buying power, and we're going to be right here on your street. So hopefully they're going to give you a little bit better deal. If you're going to replace 3 in my front yard, it's going to be cheaper to do 5.
So on this
What is the backup on
this Casa Loma example that you've got here,
yeah.
is the proposal then that we would fix the whole thing,
No,
but
no.
charge him
No,
for...
this would be just the opposite. He wants to replace his driveway, and he may replace them all, and we would give him the money when he's done that, too. That's another option, is we would give him the money once he's got it completed, and we inspect it, and we would pay him the money at the cost we would pay for it. But if he takes a full truckload, he'll get it at a better price, or if we do it a full truckload, we'll get a better price. So that's just as good having his driveway replaced and all those sections if he wants to do it. We would pay him for the sections that we would pay him for, not for the others.
So,
But we have a lot of citizens who may want to do the ones that don't look good either.
so to Robin's point, though, our limit of what we would pay out would be to the amount that we would pay.
Correct,
Yeah, so,
yeah.
But people could
But they could do it, they could,
yeah.
choose
Either have us do it or have us reimburse up
correct.
to
The way
that
we've
amount.
approached it, if they've used other contractors of their choice, is if the price is comparable to what our contractor is,
Right.
and they're licensed and insured, we go ahead and allow them to use their own contractor, as long as they're reputable and the prices are comparable to what we pay.
Or if they want to pay more but recognize they won't get reimbursed that full
Well,
amount.
they would pay for it, we just reimburse
Yeah.
them what
Yes.
we would
Yeah.
then pay them anyway.
So if we go for a policy is cover as much ground as we can and then look at the absolute most problematic trees as the remainder of that budget, are people comfortable with that?
I think we need to continue to focus on anything that's, so we fixed all the 3 inchers, right?
There's
Mackenzie?
more now.
The old
There's
ones.
No, I
They're
understand.
new.
But
So,
He said they grew.
no,
They have grown.
so I think along with getting the most dime for our dollar, or mileage for our dollar, then we need to do the most severe
As well.
as well. That would be the way I would look at it.
Right.
That would make sense.
The most severe, and I still think we need to participate to the point on the 50% ones as well.
Yeah.
Because those will help us as well. And it makes a person more economical to do the entire frontage for them, or for us, either one, to do more than less. So,
Yep, I think you're
Referring
totally
to
right.
the picture or referring to Casaloma?
well, referring to Casaloma, because when you do somebody's frontage, they may say, we want this and this and this done. And we may say, we'll participate 50%, 100%, and if you want to do more, then you can do it.
Yeah, I like very much the way
Sure.
that you
I like
set
that.
up that strata, yeah.
And I want to give you the opportunity, if people come and they've got trees that we can take down, then we're doing the city a favor, we're doing the infrastructure a favor, we're getting the trees before they are so big they're gonna cost us or somebody else $6,000 to take them down. So I don't think you should turn people away where the trees, I mean, maybe we need to put a price, you can take trees down, but only up to a certain amount. I mean, so at least we're getting, the trees that you guys can take down, I think need to come down if people are willing to let you. Let's get them down while people are willing to let us.
But I'd still like to cap that so that the whole concentration isn't trees
Right.
necessarily.
Right,
so
but that's
that-
right, but if it's the ones they can take down, it's not gonna be that expensive.
But up to a point, though. I mean, what would you
There's only-
estimate your cost to be using city equipment for a tree? Just rough number. I'm just trying to get
Well-
this times whatever equals 20,000. So if you had 20,000 of the 100,000 for tree removal, how many trees with Public Works employees or city equipment
But-
would we get?
But we're paying for the Public Works employees anyway.
Yeah, it's
So
not
that
additional
doesn't need to
cost.
come out
And
of
we've already
the,
bought the equipment.
But they're included in the budget.
so that
So
doesn't
you're
have
talking
to come
about
out
two
of the
budget line
100,000.
items and some overlap.
Well, they're paid on the budget already.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So-
So it's- you're talking about it's in there
And we
twice.
have the equipment to remove them already.
So it's not real expensive.
It's an
for us to
allocation,
put
it's
this-
not
It's labor.
an additional cost above and beyond their,
Right, but they are removed from doing other Public
Yes.
Works tasks, so.
No question about
But
it.
$100?
You mean per tree?
Mm-hmm.
Probably,
Yeah,
probably
probably,
pretty close.
yeah.
Okay, on those, I have no problem.
And
how big- and that's how what I'm big a saying.
tree can you get for $100?
What did you figure diameter-wise?
Most of the flowering pairs, we can take out in the park strips. Everybody know the flowering pairs?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yes. That
that's what's in
20,
mind.
25 feet tall, that don't have great big canopies with a lot of branching on, we can take down.
So this is-
You're talking about a 4-inch trunk, 6-inch trunk?
6, 8,
but I'm hearing some contradiction here.
Yeah, we need to be more.
Bill and Tammy have made comments in favor of saving the trees to some extent in the
You
park
can't
strips.
save the trees if they're ruining the sidewalks and they're in the park strip and they're the wrong kind of tree. We can't save those.
I think we need a more thorough process on that.
But that tree, the
But that
flowering
tree is
pear is on
ivy.
our list. We allow 10 kinds of trees
That's
in our
right.
park strip. The flowering pear is a
allowed.
permitted tree, and we allow trees within a 4-foot park strip. And that's what I'm saying is, you need to go back and look at your policy and say, maybe 4 feet isn't enough for a tree, and are we satisfied with our tree list?
So the former owner.
So you're gonna be taking out ones that meet our policy, which
Sure,
doesn't
which
make.
doesn't
Part of
make
our
sense.
policy, they don't meet the height from the width, though. The trees have to be cut straight up and down, and
But the people are coming and asking us
So
to.
the former owner of J&L lives in Centerville.
Bill, could you lean over to your mic a little bit?
I'm sorry, the former owner of J&L lives in Centerville, and he says that 4 foot is never enough for a tree. And he says, if you notice up and down the street here by me where the neighbors trust me, we have no trees in the park strip.
That's what Mr. Zeidler says as well, basically.
And that's what both the guys from Salt Lake have told us, and one of them lives right over here next to the car wash.
So obviously, there's a flaw in the policy.
You may want to look at that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if we're taking out trees, yeah, let's look at the policy. And I'm just saying, this is in conjunction with it, but
Right.
I think you
Right.
want to make sure.
But Lisa, I
you're
do
not-
think we need to remember, we're not going to people knocking on their door and saying, we want to take your tree down. These are people that are coming to us and saying, my sidewalk isn't safe, and I have a tree, and if you'll take it down, I'd love to have it taken down. We're not going to people and saying, your tree is against the ordinance, we're going to take it down.
But
We're
we-
doing it for people that are want it taken down.
I don't think you understand. He's proposing to send them a letter, so we'll go to him.
But
But
we're
it's still
offering.
them saying,
We're
yep,
not
we
saying
want to
you've
do
got to
that.
take that tree
We're
down.
not gonna tell them that we're gonna force them to take the tree.
No,
down.
I understand that.
No,
We're
but,
just saying, if
We're
you'd
just
like
saying-
that tree down, we'll do it for free.
so
They could get taken down what they want.
let's get some clarity, because a few minutes ago, I thought we were leaning towards focusing on the areas without trees. And not because we won't ever deal with that, but just to kind of get more bang for our buck right now on an issue that we have more clarity on. Pushing pause a little bit on the other stuff, making sure we're not sending a message that is different than after we do more research we might want to send.
But we're talking
then we
about
get more-
$100 trees now.
Right. So then I heard that, and so my question is, how do we communicate that option though, without opening the floodgates and confusing people?
We can target those. We
You can-
have
you can-
identified spots where,
So,
we
so
went out and identified if we were able to take them out. Or we
Okay.
needed a contract.
okay, so we would be sending letters to homeowners that have 1 to 3 inch cracks without trees, and we would be sending letters to homeowners that have 1 to 3 inch cracks with trees that Public Works Department could take out,
We could do that.
to offer that
We could do
option.
that, yes, if that's what
That
you'd
would
like
work.
us to do, we can do that. And then we could send letters to those that don't have trees that are 1 inch or greater as well.
That's what you, yeah, part of
Yeah.
her suggestion,
Yeah,
I think.
and that's not a problem, if that's what you want us to do.
So when we did all the tree removal and the curb and gutter replacement up on the north end, how much infrastructure did we end up replacing as parts? Because I saw various root balls you brought in. Was that indicative of the whole street, one or
Yes.
two?
Most of the street, they had to go back, take the trees out, and then they had to take the linear roots out in between the trees that were growing horizontal with it, that had wrapped around the, in fact, we probably still got the roots and some of the stuff that were collected from that.
But what he's saying is you only brought in 1 or 2 of those. I mean, were
Right.
there
there was a
50 of
lot.
them, or?
Oh, I would say, yeah, there was a lot that had to be removed. I think it cost us another $10,000.
So-
Just the contractor, that wasn't even the tree removal contractor. The other contractor charged us to remove the roots between.
So that's the point I'm trying to get at, that it's not a $100 tree necessarily. It's, we don't know until we open the ground up what we got, right?
But those
Our
were big
intent is
trees.
not-
Those were huge trees.
We're not intending on
enormous.
taking the whole root system down all the way along the park strip, because we took the curb gutter and the sidewalk out and then took all the root system out. We would grind what's on the surface and let the rest of it rot in the ground. So we probably wouldn't be as thorough as we were on 1825.
Okay, so then you're back to that lower number.
Yeah,
I
the
think we're
number's
okay.
gonna be lower, because we're not, yeah, our intent is not to be as aggressive at taking the roots out, so.
I think, Tammy, the advantage is today a property owner could go out there and decide they're going to take their tree out in the infrastructure and cause damage. If, they could do that voluntarily today, or they can volunteer for this, and if it's absorbable in the costs and we're potentially preserving infrastructure from additional damage, that seems
That's
like,
a benefit.
So to
if they were
move
going to
us,
do it anyway, why not?
to move us forward, how many of us are in agreement that they can take down trees that they can take down and we're not paying to have someone taken down? I'm in agreement to that. How many
I
others?
am.
So on us being able to take them down, that didn't include any stump grinding. That was just us leaving the stump.
Yeah, so there would be, I think,
So we'd have to pay for that.
we'd have to pay for somebody to grind
Yeah,
that
we'd
stump
have to pay
down,
for
so
that
it's,
to figure out.
My preference would be to have us do it in phases, and have us do a phase 1, targeting just without tree areas, and see what kind of take we get.
As far as for the cost sharing?
So
With
if
the
it's something
100,000 that
like,
we
you
have
see on
this year.
Castle Loma here, without trees.
With the 100,000 we have this year, let's just first send out a blast of letters to those without trees, see what kind of take we get, how much of the money we are able to,
203
that are 1 inch or greater.
that are one or,
Right.
yeah.
1 inch or greater without trees. Let's just start that as a phase 1. That would be a motion.
I don't agree with that because I think the trees are still raise up, and so we're creating ourselves a liability.
I wouldn't mind that, Tammy. I think that's a good starting point. If we could have some
That's
sort of
500 fixes.
if we could have a time limit and say the take rate in the
$500 a
next
fix, rather.
3 weeks, and then we send the next set of letters, which is the 176 with the or the however many, with the trees that Public Works could take out.
That
So that we could have a guesstimate on the take rate, and then, but not say, oh, well, we didn't use up all our money this year because not enough people took. I don't want to have it sit and just sit there.
One of our concerns about, we wouldn't send letters out now if we're going to do that type of a policy, because we're not going to be doing them this winter.
The concrete.
We're doing them in the spring. Our thought was, send them out to the tree owners, we would take the trees down now, and then we would fix in the spring. So we don't have a problem. If you want to wait until spring, then we would send them out, and then we would see how many.
I actually like the idea of sending the letter out now, because some of this will be cost sharing, and then people could be saving their money.
Well, we won't be doing the work.
Right, but I like giving, I agree with your idea of a time limit, Stephanie, but I also think it's important to give people a heads up and say, you know, because some of this might be the 50% cost share, and then they could save money, be thinking about it, be deciding, and then we could send out a reminder blast and say, now tell us by this date if you want to participate.
So tell me if my thinking's wrong. If we go that route, we're fixing a lot more of our sidewalks. And the trees are still creating damage, but it's not any more cost than we would have had anyway. And aren't you going to have a lot more, and your liability, because you're doing so much, I mean, Lisa, you've often talked about this, you can show that you are making an effort to get it fixed. Aren't we getting so many more fixed that way? And having a lot more people happier that things have been taken care of?
And giving
Possibly.
ourselves time to dive into this whole tree versus sidewalk question.
But at the same time,
You're not getting the trees, though, the trees that are
That's the-
causing more problems into the future. It's amazing how much has changed since she did her last review and how much they've changed since then. So we're just trying
8%.
to cut off what's causing the problems. We don't care what we spend our money. If you guys don't want, you want to leave the streets, we really don't care. I mean, it's really going to be a cost-benefit ratio. And
I've been wanting to say this all night. We recognize it's a growing problem, but
yeah, it is. No problem.
but to the most bang for the buck, showing the best good faith effort. If we concentrate on the non-tree areas initially, and then some of these that can be taken down by Public Works through a voluntary program, I'm okay with that. The part that I'm thinking is this needs to get, if we're going to try and do these cost shares to fix this over time, this needs to be more of almost like a spring cleanup. You need to know what cycles you can apply to get into these programs and get people, you know, everyone knows about the yellow curbs. Not many people know that we're really entertaining this. So I think we should use that as we have windows of opportunity that you can participate in. And I think people, once they're calibrated to that, will actually start participating in the program a lot more. I would.
One of my greatest concerns is we've really not come up with a policy. And I question when we'll ever come up with a policy. And that's fine if you want to just keep going and not address the trees. But I think at some point in time, we've got to decide whether we're going to handle the trees and what we're going to do with them. So if you want to push it out another 2 years before you actually create the policy, that's up to you guys whether you want to do that or not. We're willing to spend the money any way you want us to spend it. But I do feel getting cooperation is key to what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And how people spend money appropriately on their own property.
One of the issues, and we had something else like this that I'd asked that it be on the agenda at least once a month until we got it resolved, and I don't think that's happened, and can't even remember what it was at the moment. But you're right, it needs to be resolved.
It does.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of diversity of opinion and thought, and there's 5 or 6 people, 5, 6, 7 people expressing it here, and we've got hundreds of residents who have strong opinions. I agree, we need to come to a resolution. I think it needs to be talked about a lot. I think it needs to be hammered out. I think Tammy is right. We need to figure some things out. One of the things that confuses me is you showed the damage that the trees are doing in the park strips. Well, if we go back to the other picture at the top, we take that tree, everything's working in front of that house and in that park strip and in that water. One next door to me, literally, that tree stump touches the curb on one side and the sidewalk on the other side, it's buckled, we fixed it once, doesn't seem to be having any problems with his utilities. So is it always a problem, or is it sometimes a problem? Now, that tree probably shouldn't be there, but again, you're talking about a massive tree that, as the mayor has said, frames the neighborhood. I hate the leaves in the fall, but, you know, it is just plain beautiful, and I get a ton of shade on it all summer long. Boy, I sure don't think I want you to take that out until I move.
Yeah.
I'm all for getting a lot of bang for the buck, but on the other side, it pains me to say Public Works is available right now to take out some of these trees and prevent them from getting bigger, and it would be the citizens who wanted them out anyway and would be cooperative. Let's not do it until next spring after we see what the people without trees want to do.
Well, then they've got bigger, so then they're.
Now
so
they're
big that our
bigger, and
Public
now we
Works
can't do them.
take out.
6 months isn't going to make them bigger.
No, I
One
mean,
thing we talked about
A lot of winter time.
as a team is if Public Work takes them out in the fall, when the leaves are off of them,
That's right.
there's less mess and less work. So fall or spring was when we talked about removing trees that Public Works could remove.
let's remember too that this council is catching up from years and years and years of inaction. And so if we take our time, to Bill's point, to be really thorough about the policy that we do want to set that goes along with our actions here, I think our concern is liability. We've recognized the problem. We want to be aggressively moving forward on that. We've set aside some money. We are absolutely taking those steps. We're aggressively moving forward on spending some of that money this spring and showing that we're taking action. And then we'll also continue to aggressively move forward on the policy question, which this just gives us more time to start that process in a really thorough way. So I would just restate my motion that for now, as a phase one, we send letters out to those without trees. We explain the strata and the cost-sharing possibilities so that they could budget for it if they want. And then we resend out the invitation in the spring with a short time frame of when to accept the possibility of opting into this program. And then by that time, we'll have made some more decisions.
You're okay with the 100%, the 50%?
Yes, I like the way you set it up.
So I'm not sure I understand what you're sending now, a letter, and then one in the spring to the same folks?
I think that's the more fair, with the cost-sharing option, I think that's the more fair way to do it, so they have a heads up.
Well, why don't you have them send a letter? Send a letter now, have them sign up, give them a deadline in which to.
Okay, that would absolutely work too.
That works too.
So in that, are we saying that we're going to spend 100% of our allocated budget for non-tree related fixes?
If we
I'm not
have that
saying that to
many
be-
takers, then yes, because the point is we want to spend the money to fix the problem, and if we
Right.
have that many takers, then, yeah.
Well, right, so what I'm trying to look at is if we get to next spring, and we don't have a bunch of cost share people, we've got some percentage who want to do that of the available. Are we committing to say the rest of that budget is going to be spent anyway on
No.
non-tree repairs?
No, and I like the
No,
idea
just-
here of, to get more clarity on how much will be spent, when we send the letter out, say the work will be done in the spring, and the cost sharing will happen in the spring, but you need to accept or decline, you need to accept and opt in now, so that we know. That works too.
So
Other
if
than
we-
I still think you'll need to send out another notification to actually give people a heads up we're coming, but
Yeah,
that,
of course.
So then if we
Well, those
have
that
money
accept.
left, can we do the ones, so if we don't have enough takers without trees, then
we
in the
send to the tree
spring,
people.
can't we send those, but it's gonna have to go out early spring or winter so that we're ready the minute the ground clears.
but that gives us more time to debate that issue.
Well, you
more.
could give
I
your,
don't
if the first round, you could give your takers a deadline to get back by end of whatever.
End of October.
Yeah, November.
And then you can
I'd
do
like
it, then
that.
you can do Stephanie's original thought was multiple letters. You could do a second targeted letter depending on responses to the first one in November, coming up with trees that we can take out through Public Works over the winter.
Yeah.
Early spring. Yeah.
Can we take trees down over the winter? So that's lots of non-messy months. So let's for now just focus on this phase 1, and then at a future meeting, see what those numbers are, and then decide a phase 2. That's the motion. And I'll let staff decide how best to frame deadlines and responses and minimize the number of letters going out over and over again, but.
Okay.
I do think, though, Steve, I'd like to suggest that we ought to be revisiting this frequently to push it through.
And just while you're pondering that motion, so hopefully maybe your other budget still includes, because we still need to paint and keep up on the painting and maybe some grinding. Are you doing some grinding out of a different budget?
Attorneys.
Same budget.
Same budget.
Because there might, anyway, I
That's
mean,
a
we're.
whole other animal. Do you want to do any grinding? We've just talked about removing.
How much time you got tonight?
Well,
I turned into a pumpkin at 9, so.
Yeah. I need to go.
If you want to do grinding, that's an option. Or you can spend it all on remove and replace.
Well, let's see what we get back on these acceptance.
Yeah, how soon can we get those letters out if we go that route?
Well, if we don't get enough, we may end up just doing some grinding or something like that too, you know. Still
Yeah.
got plenty of grinding left.
The letters could go out within the week.
When this process first started 2 years ago,
Or
I
more.
provided Steve, and I don't remember who else, some literature about a group in Logan that has a floating sidewalk to deal with the sidewalk issue on trees. Now, that doesn't help the other infrastructure in the parking strip. There are some distinctive trees that, and I don't consider myself a tree hugger, but there are some distinctive trees that I would prefer not to see removed. And none of them are in my yard, so I'm not affected. But I do think, consistent with what Tammy's saying, that we ought to see if there are any option that we can do to keep the trees reasonably, we ought to think about.
Well, just in summary, so that you understand where staff has been coming from, our perception of where most of you fell on this is different than our perception tonight of where the majority seems to fall. So I perceive a shift in the value that you're assigning to trees in the park strip, and that's okay. I just want to explain that's why staff went in the direction they did, is because we perceived that we had majority of the council wanting us to be more aggressive on removing the trees. So now hearing you tonight, we will certainly respond to your directive and you can take more time
Well, we
on
haven't
the
voted yet, so we
tree
don't know.
issue. So
It hasn't gotten a second.
okay. But I think what I hear is if the motion passes, then we are to focus right away with a letter out to those 1 inch or greater places where there's not a tree involved, and give them a deadline to respond that they want to participate, and then we'll go from there.
Mm-hmm. No harm in just taking a first step.
I do
And
think,
I don't think that you misinterpreted necessarily, Steve. It's just that I think the focus, and maybe I'm wrong, is it's been more so about sidewalks than what we're doing with our sidewalk problem, hasn't it been? I mean, maybe I wasn't involved in the whole conversation, but.
Yeah, no, you weren't involved in the survey that I gave the council some months ago, and the
Okay.
answers to that are somewhat different than what I'm hearing tonight. So, and that's okay. You evolved to
There is a lot of public interest in the trees.
yeah.
And what I've always said is that I don't have a final answer in my mind, but I have felt that the conversation we've had thus far has not been balanced enough. If we're doing a cost-benefit analysis, if we're worried about liability costs and sidewalk costs and utility costs, we need to make sure we're also talking about the value that the trees bring to our community, and just make sure we're doing that full analysis.
As far as the evolution, I'm not sure that I've evolved. I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of, I'm going to get no argument from the areas where there aren't trees.
Right.
That one, that's easy.
I understand.
That's low-hanging fruit. That's low-hanging
Practicality
fruit.
of
That's the
that.
low-hanging fruit. I'm going to get no argument. The
Yeah.
other ones, yeah, tougher policy question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would be curious to know why you think, come down if you could a little bit, Jake. A little more. Why that tree is not causing problems in that park strip?
Why it's not?
It is.
It is causing
I don't think-
sidewalks up, but it's not as bad because the sidewalk is raised when she did her study. Isn't this one on 1100 North?
It looks to me like it is, and because I live there,
Yeah,
but.
yeah, you drive down that street.
drive that
If you go out
street.
there, the curb and gutter's been pushed
And about
and buckled, and the sidewalk is raised about 6 inches, but we've ground it to make it so that it doesn't, on her rating, it's not, this is as high as the street we took, when we took east of it, you know, up by, above Coils up there. This one was that bad, but it wasn't differentiated, it didn't have a separation. So it's as bad, and eventually it's gonna separate and you'll have 8 inches of fall on it. So there's no question that that someday is gonna be even worse. It's raised since we painted it the last time, so, but it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. We keep grinding it, and it's gone like this, so.
I challenge everybody on the council to go for a ride with Randy and look at the trees and the sidewalks, because that's probably why I'm on a little bit different page than some of you, is I have been out and looked at them with Randy, and I was flabbergasted.
And I would challenge the council to go visit a city like Palo Alto, for instance. And
But do they have their utilities in the park strip?
Right, and that's-
Because
those
it
are-
has to be apples to apples
those
before we
are the
start
list of
talking about it.
questions to explore. Like, this maybe isn't necessarily reinventing the wheel. Like, that's all I'm saying.
And
Let's
Palo
get.
Alto is a community that they went around the trees and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I actually had some people that live up on 1975 North that were from Palo Alto.
Yeah,
And they done their homework and they planted the right trees.
yeah,
And they didn't plant them in the park strip because of what it done in Palo Alto.
yeah.
They planted them in behind the site.
So there are a lot of questions to get asked. Like, I want data on how many of the utilities that we know are being interrupted and harmed and things like that. So, but that's for another night. Okay. Motion on the table.
Do we do have a motion on the table?
I hate to say it, but can we
Restate the motion, please.
please? In a succinct form.
The motion is
Fair
to
enough.
direct staff to send a letter out ASAP to sidewalk cracks between 1 and 3 inches that do not involve a tree. With and I'm going to just leave this to staff to determine the best route. Putting a deadline to let us know now, letting them know
we'll
in
work
the
out
spring,
those.
that you work out those details. And that will just be our first step, phase 1.
Second.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Sure.
Is this the time? At that point, if we don't get enough takers, then we send out the next batch of letters to people with trees that the Public Works can take down.
Well, what if, Robin, instead, we just came back and report to you at the results of this first phase, and you could consider that
And then make that decision
at
another
that
night.
time?
Because
I
Mackenzie said we
would-
can get letters out within 4 days, right?
I'd rather have it decided tonight that we just do that boom, boom, instead of having this whole discussion again, because we've been at it for,
Then let's
No,
maybe
an hour
have
and
2
something.
different motions, because those might get different results. So
Are
let's
you
just,
willing to pull your motion back and make a second one?
Yes.
Do that then.
okay.
Okay, well, we got to see if she gets a second before I.
So we
I
have,
second it.
so
Why
it's-
don't you
we got a
just make a
second.
motion
So we
to
have-
amend, if that's what
Right.
you want to add, just make a motion to amend. So
She
we have,
did.
I
She
did.
She
She
did.
did, but she hasn't had a second to it, and
I
I'm
will
asking her
second
to
it,
withdraw.
but,
Oh, did you
but I-
second it?
but I don't know if it's friendly to.
I'm okay if we handle as 2 separate motions that are, because they're distinct
Yep.
pieces of
Go
the
ahead.
same staff direction, and it works either way for me.
So we have a motion and a second to the first motion. Everybody's got it. Doesn't need to be
Yep.
restated again, does it?
Nope.
So let's vote on that motion.
it's fine to do the motion to
They've got a
amend.
motion to amend.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, motion to
yeah.
amend. And do we have a second on the motion to amend?
Yes, I did.
so then you're just going to vote on the amendment. If you're amending the motion, it's going to be a 2-step process. You just vote on on Robin's amendment, and if that passes, then vote on the motion as amended.
Right.
Okay, so we're voting on Robin's amendment. Robin restated, so everybody's clear.
That after we send the first batch of letters out, if we don't get enough takers, then they will send out another round of letters to the residents that the city can take out their trees. The Public Works can take out the trees.
Okay, so we're voting on that amendment, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay. Can I do I have to roll call, or can I, Councilman Ince?
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
So that motion fails, 3-2.
So the amendment fails.
The
So you
amended
still have,
motion
back to
fails,
the
excuse
so
me.
now you just have the regular motion back on the table unless someone wants to try another amendment.
Okay, so the regular motion's back on the table. We still have a motion and a second, correct?
Yes.
So let's start, Councilman McEwen.
Aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. Okay.
Now I'd like to make a motion that, isn't it the same motion?
It's the same motion, but it's instead of amending hers,
Okay.
you're making a
So now I
motion.
would like to make a motion that if we don't have enough letters returned to use all the money, that the Public Works can send out letters to the residents that have trees that Public Works can take down themselves.
I can second that because you said use all the money, so that's totally where I want to be. Let's second that.
And I'd like to have a little discussion on that. I would just like to say that I'd like to wait on that because I'd like to see what the actual numbers are and how much we'll spend, and then discuss all the options of what to do with the rest. Maybe we would want to do some grinding.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the grinding and what legal issues we may have there, so.
And again, just
Glad you
having a
brought that
more research, more background information, more citizen input on how we approach the whole tree issue. So it doesn't mean put it off forever, but we don't even know how much will be left at this point, and we might want to talk more thoroughly on another night about all the different options of how to spend the rest of the money.
But her motion included subject to how much money is left to do it with. So I think it opens the door for consideration of what you're talking about. And as I say, this is one of those things that I think we need to keep pushing on and get all the way through, and we're less than halfway through, in my opinion. So that's my view on it. I hear what you're saying, and I don't totally disagree, but I think we need to keep the momentum up.
Okay, so I've made the motion, so we're waiting.
And George seconded.
Oh, George seconded. So we need to vote on that?
So we have a motion and second. Councilwoman Ivy?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 4-1. Okay.
So after these 2 rounds of letters, we're going to have some clarity we don't have tonight, which is what is the citizen participation? As of this point, it's all guesswork until we have those responses.
And I really do like George's idea of getting the biggest bang for our buck. I mean, I'm totally, let's get as many done as I was frustrated with trees that are gonna cost us $3,500 to take down for the one tree. I'd rather get more sidewalk done. So I agree with that, but I also want to get down some of these trees before they do more damage.
Mayor, I need to excuse myself for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Fillmore. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Go to work.
Randy, Mark,
Randy,
Mackenzie.
knowing you, you're probably going to work. Mark, you get down there, he'll have the letters all ready to go.
Let's go to item number 8, financial report, Marcus. Hey, Marcus, you have enough time over there to issue your audit for some other city?
Yeah,
Did they let you get done in time?
No.
So
No.
it's all yours.
Yeah, okay, so I think we're gonna look at the June 2nd, or the June 30th financials, the second go-around.
Which version?
It's
The August
updated.
version?
No, the June 30th updated one is what we're gonna look at first.
Represents the
unaudited?
13,
The
period
period
13.
So there's a few things that are different with year-end financial statements versus the normal monthly financial statements. And one of them is to do with tax revenue, C-road revenue, and franchise fees. That those types of revenues are 1 to 2 months behind. And so in a normal month, we're estimating 1 to 2 months of those types of revenue. At period 13, we'll wait until the end of August, and then we'll actually know what those amounts are. And so we'll have solid numbers on all of those. So that's one of the things we'll look at. The other area that's different is with the accounts payable. During a normal month, all the invoices received during that month are just paid right towards the very end of the month, and there's no actual APs recorded in a monthly financial statement. But at year end, we'll have July and August that will get all the invoices, and we'll go through and say, okay, these ones are related to the prior year, these ones are current year, and then we'll code the ones to the prior year back to accounts payable. And for the first June financial statement that we presented in August, we had probably 80% of the accounts payable there, maybe a little bit more. But then this financial statement will include all of the accounts payable. Total accounts payable throughout all funds is around a little over 700,000, which is about 50,000 higher than it was when we presented in the June for the August, when we presented in August. The other differences are related to debt. Now debt and fixed assets, those are not recorded in governmental funds, so your general fund, any special revenue funds, capital projects fund, there's no long-term debt or fixed assets recorded at the fund financial level. But in your enterprise funds, we do have the long-term debt and the fixed assets in there. And so what we'll see in enterprise funds is the expenses will actually be less now than they were a month ago, because the debt payments originally were expensed out. They're put in expense accounts, but now we take them out of expense accounts and reduce the liability in the enterprise funds. And so the enterprise funds will see lower expenses, where in governmental funds we don't do that. In the CAFR, there is a schedule that converts the governmental funds into full accrual to accounting, and that's the government-wide financial statements. So just want to go through that real quick. But on the cash position, really, the overall cash hasn't changed from a month ago. I mean, we did do an additional due to, due from between the general fund and the water fund because of some additional restricted cash that needed to be there in the water fund. So there's about 4,000 difference between those two funds, but everything else is the same. And then if we go down to the next schedule, I mean, here's the restricted cash amounts. I mean, not a whole lot changed there. I mean, the impact fee, the 60,000, that changed. It was a little over 100,000 before, but Jake's been working on the impact fee schedule, and we found that all of it, but about 60,000 has been spent. The rest of those numbers are about the same. I mean, the water fund was at about 298, now it's at 302. And that money's just money that developers have paid in that the city's holding on to until the projects are done that the city has to do with the developer's money. Now if we go to the next page, so overall what happened, how the tax revenue, how the changes that were made, the tax difference, right now the revenue for taxes was $6,820,520. In the last month, it was $6,747,000. So the overall tax revenue increased by about $73,000 when we trued up the estimated amounts to the actual amounts. So the overall total revenue compared to budget, last month we were about $85,000 over budget. Now we're about $165,000. You can see that right there on line 17. That we're $165,000 over the budget on the revenue side. Now the expenditure side didn't change a whole lot, especially in the general fund. because we had most of the accounts payable in there as of last month. But it did go, I mean, I think it changed $7,000, so the expenses increased $7,000 compared to last month. But the overall net income is $532,000, where at the end of last month it was $459,000, and so about 70.
Because of the additional revenue.
Because of the additional revenue.
Combination of additional revenue and the less lower expenses.
Right, well, in the general fund, it was actually about 7,000 more in expenses in the general fund, because we had an additional 7,000 of accounts payable in the general fund.
Okay.
And so and last year in the CAF, for the end of year financials, our unrestricted fund balance was a little over 600,000. And so this 500,000 is going to add to that. So we're going to be somewhere around 1.1 million in the unrestricted fund balance. That'll probably be around 12-13%, where last year we were around 6 or 7%. So that's great. I mean, things are looking good. Now on the next page, the RDA fund, nothing changed here compared to the financials we presented last month, so there's nothing really to talk about there. The rec fund, the revenues are the exact same. The expenses, there was $500 increase in expenses due to some accounts payable that was coded there. I mean, overall, in the expenses were higher than revenue, but we're okay because we had excess in fund balance last year, and we're still a positive fund balance, so nothing to be worried about there. On the RAP tax, when we trued up that accounts receivable, the revenue increased about $10,000. The expenses stayed the same. Cemetery perpetual care fund, we didn't have any changes to that fund. And no changes to the debt service fund. And the park improvement fund, that the revenue there didn't change either. It's the same. The expenditures increased about $35,000 due to some accounts payable that came in. And the transportation fund, we trued up the accounts receivable for taxes and Class C road, and that increased the revenue about $5,000. Most of that was due to the Prop 1 money. Expenditures were the same. Then no change in the Utopia fund. Then we get down into the water fund, the enterprise funds. And on the revenue side of the water fund, there's no change. The expenditure side in the water fund, there's a $150,000 decrease, and most of that's due to the bond payment that was taken out of expense and moved to reduce the bond liability. Sanitation fund, there was no change on the revenue or expense side. The drainage fund, the revenue's the same. There was a $40,000 decrease due to part of the bond payment coming out of that fund, and then no change on the telecom fund. The Whitaker fund, there was about $200 increase on the expenditure side. But any questions on the updated June financials, or anything we want to look into a little bit more?
This now becomes the starting point for the auditors, right?
Correct, yeah, we just got the report from Utopia 2 days ago that we used to reconcile the telecom fund, but that won't change anything in the budget. It's just balance sheet things that'll change. And then there's the government-wide, the fixed asset portion that needs to be finished off, and then we go through kind of a detailed review of everything and make sure we have all the schedules for the auditors, and so that'll be done here in the next 2-3 weeks. So yeah, but any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we can move into the August ones if we're ready.
And I'd suggest, unless the council wants to go in more depth, that you just kind of give a
Yeah.
high level, because it's only a 2-month report. It doesn't really tell you much. If
Okay.
there's anything that you think it is telling you, Marcus, you can point it out, but it's
Okay, yeah,
pretty limited in its meaning for just 2 months.
right. Yeah, we'll go quick. So on this page, kind of something I stuck out to me. I mean, you look at the June cash of about 1.2 million, and then you look at the August cash of 736,000. That's well over $400,000 decrease. And what that is, I mean, we'll see. I mean, expenses are about $120,000 higher than revenue at this point. And that's pretty expected until the property tax money comes in December, that we normally run at a loss until then. The other portion of that decrease is due to the general fund had 152,000 in accounts payable. And so after year end, all that 152,000 is paid. So that reduces cash. The other part of it is, as of June 30th, there was zero in prepaid expenses. But as of August, there's about 100,000 in prepaid expenses, meaning the cash went out, but it didn't hit an expense account. And so that 100,000 went out, and most of it's for the fire, the payment to the fire department. And some of it to liability insurance and that sort of thing. And so a lot of cash, I mean, goes out at the beginning of the year for those types of things. So on the next page, I mean, we'll see that, we go down, that, I mean, at this point, the cash is a little bit lower than the actual restricted cash in the general fund. But I mean, that's not out of the ordinary with the things we just talked about, so that'll go up. If we go into the general fund, I mean, the revenue side is looking good. I mean, sales tax is at 19%. Property tax, we really won't have a whole lot there, so we kind of expect it to be low. But overall, the general fund revenue is at 14%. And I mean, the year, what we're comparing that to is 2 months, is about 17%. On the expenditure side, overall, we're at 15%. And I've gone through, I mean, there's some that are over the 17%. If there's any that anyone's concerned about, I can answer questions about them. But I've gone through, and I mean, some are just because of movies in the park, or there's some part-time.
You pay a whole year's worth of some things.
Yeah, you pay that, and so there's really nothing to be concerned about. But if you do have any questions on why we're high in certain areas.
Line 15, non-operating revenue, I take it there's some kind of a quirky story there.
Non-operating revenue, line 15.
3419.
Budget 4,000 and we've gotten 3,400 in.
Non-operating revenue.
Okay,
Right
let
up
me
there at
write
the
that
top.
up. 14.
Wonder if that's wonder if that's interest.
Non-operating revenue.
Interest on the, I don't know.
Okay, it's the miscellaneous contribution account.
I think it's police. I think it's
Oh,
donations for police.
yeah, they got donations for the police department.
I think that's what it is.
I assumed it was something funky like that.
Yeah. All right, any other questions about the general fund? Okay. Now, I mean, RDA fund, you have the lease revenue from the theater. Expenses side is really just transfers to Utopia fund, and then admin and insurance costs. The recreation, I mean, there's a little bit of revenue there, but most of that is the $41,000 transfer from the general fund. We made the whole transfer up front because a lot of the costs in the rec fund are, in July and August. Wrap tax, looks good. I mean, the expenditure side is just the transfer to the parks and transfer to the Whitaker Fund. Little bit of revenue on the cemetery perpetual care. No activity in the debt service fund. And the park fund, I mean, the revenues, majority from the RAP tax fund. And there's a little expense on the community park project. Transportation fund, everything looks right on track with the Prop 1 money and the C Road money. The expenditures are related to the 2018, the slurry seal project. The Utopia Fund, revenues that transfers in, the expenditures to pay the pledge payment. I mean, that looks how it should. The water fund, I did want to look, I flagged this, the operating revenues at 14%. Normally that's a little bit closer to the 16-17% where, so I kind of want to look into that and see why it's a little lower than I thought it should be. The expenditures seem good. And then the sanitation fund, there's a small issue with the interest allocation journal entry to put that at a negative amount, and so we'll get that corrected. But yeah, that 144 shouldn't be a negative amount. And the expenditure side, with the timing of the payments, there's 1 month on the collection and green waste part that we need to get 2 months in there. But everything looks right on the drainage utility and the telecom fund. And then the Whitaker Fund, just the transfers in, and then their normal operating expenses, and they look right at the 17%. But any questions you have as you scan through any of those funds?
Looks good.
Sounds like it looks good to everybody. When does the auditor start?
October. I don't know, their scheduling was a little bit different this year than last, and I told them I'd get them everything the end of September because they weren't going to start until October, and so yeah, so they're going to start from their office in October, and then they're going to come down here on site towards the end of October and wrap it up.
Okay, do you expect that they'll make any entries to the books? Have they in the past, or?
No, I mean, I don't know, there might be like 1 or 2, but we'll get it.
There were very few
We'll
last year, right, when Marcus was helping us.
It was pretty clean last year,
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks. Anybody, any other questions? Thanks, Marcus, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry you had to wait.
No, that's okay. My battery was just running out.
All right, let's move on to Mayor's report. I have a lot of things, but I'm going to focus on 2, and maybe mention briefly 1 or 2 others. I usually come in to the city all day Tuesday, and then I pop in for other meetings throughout the week. Last Tuesday, I wasn't able to be in because I had to be in court, not on a city matter, so we're okay. But today, after I met with Steve, I met with Bruce Cox. And in following up from what I said 2 weeks ago when I was driving down the frontage road and saw Tree City USA, I asked Bruce, I said, in meeting our criteria to be a Tree City USA, we're supposed to have a tree board. He said it was kind of him and his department. And so I proposed to him, I said, I would like to have you, maybe somebody from public safety, maybe somebody from public works, an arborist, and maybe 2 or 3 citizens to review kind of our tree policy and to give us some ideas and suggestions for, I'm not an expert on trees, but on what we should be doing with our trees. It wouldn't be a committee that meets monthly. I mean, I wouldn't see the need for that. I mean, you'd be setting the policy and maybe or just researching the policy and maybe meeting, once or twice a year or something. But so Bruce was great with it. Thought it was a fabulous idea, and so I like the idea of mixing some professionals with some residents from the community. It's what we did with Centerville Cares with the doctors and the Davis Health, and then with some of our residents as well too. I just think that the residents can learn from them, and then they can also see what the residents' concerns are as well too. So that's what I'm looking to do. So
With your permission, I will approach the guy that used to run J&L.
yeah, oh yeah, and I'm sorry, I have a couple ideas for residents,
Related to an arborist.
but I welcome, people that you may know as well too. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I just was offering if you'd
Yes,
like, I will approach
for sure.
him.
I'd love you to drop me names, send me an email, call me, text me, whatever. But I welcome. And I'd like to get on it quick. So give me your names quick.
My one concern is I don't want it to sidetrack where we are with the tree and sidewalk issue.
I'm not planning on that.
Okay.
Not at all. That's why I did not bring it up in the middle of the discussion.
Awesome.
I wanted to proceed forward.
This is to tick the box for the Tree City USA.
Part of it is,
Okay.
yeah, part of it is. Yeah. And the second thing is I know that I've beat you guys up pretty good about this pickleball thing. Steve tells me 2 weeks from today, we don't have anything before our meeting. I would love you to all be involved. I would love to go within the city, but we don't really have pickleball courts and our lines weren't painted. That's one reason we canceled it before. So I've talked with the mayor of Farmington. He's willing to meet with us as well too. And just kind of look at their pickleball courts. I would also have somebody from the Utah Pickleball Association here, an instructor from Weber State. And also right behind their pickleball courts is a brand new park as well too that has kind of a baseball theme. So it gives you, I'm not proposing baseball theme here, I'm just saying that that's what they did down there. And so it gives you another idea on a brand new park. And so I would love to have you all come if you can. I'd said 5 if you can't hear from work or by 5:30. I was just thinking, you might want to get back and change before you come to council meeting that night. But
Are we going to play pickleball or just see it?
the second, you are welcome to play if you want to play. If you don't want to play, you can see it, you can watch it.
Are you going to play?
I'll play, yeah. I've been playing most every Monday night, so. And then once or twice other during the week, but I've started playing basketball now, so that's a different story. So, we could do the pickleball court and have instructors. The mayor is going to come there. He may have a couple of council members come, so you can ask them about their process, what they did, what they went through. But I was talking to Mayor Talbot just before our meeting started tonight. So. Yeah.
You said 5:30? Are we meeting in Farmington or meeting here?
5 to 5:30 at Farmington, I was thinking. It's just, do you know where it's at? Just they have the new rec center. It's just west of the new rec center. They're just, I guess, kind of down the road north from the new high school. I don't know what that address of that street is, but.
Can you get us that?
It's by that they have a charter school on the corner that you come just as you go to their.
Is it the one that's right there by the rec center?
The pickleball courts? Yeah, it's just west of them.
So
And they're putting in 4 baseball diamonds there as well too.
You go down Lover's Lane and you turn at the high school towards Farmington. And
Yes.
and you run right into it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
My 4-year-old.
And then Centerville Cares launched. That went great. We have stuff up on the website if you ever want to look at yourself in the video. Centerville Care at centervilleut.net, and then we have links to classes, activities within the city, resources, reach out ideas. So I'll let you do that on your own. Firefighter retirement issue. The state had taken some money to some general fund that should have gone retirement. So Chief Bassett and their attorney is going to draft a letter for us as a board to review next meeting, and so they can address this issue the upcoming session. And then I'll either email you guys or bring something up about some things that I thought was kind of interesting for all of us from the ULCT meetings. And then my last thing is a former Davis, member of the Davis County Sheriff's Department, who used to live by me. He wanted me to pass on. He called me just today. He's moved to Layton, but he's a couple doors away from me. That his mom passed away here in Centerville, and the police force went to her home and found her passed away. She was older, but they just dealt with her wonderfully. And he says, you just need to let the police force know in your city council. So I told them I'd let you guys know tonight. So I think that's it.
Going to mention the groundbreaking?
Oh.
There was that little thing.
I'm trying to push through it. I'm so sorry. We had a great groundbreaking on Saturday. The chief gave a great talk. I mean, you probably all heard the story about the address of the fire station and how it matches the Fallen of 911. I made some comments, and Mayor Earnshaw, who's the chair of the board. We had fire officers there. We had the chief said there were yesterday in our board meeting. He said some residents came up to him. Wow, that was great. And he said, "Well, where are you? I couldn't see you." And he says, "Well, we're standing on Main Street listening." I mean, I guess that microphone was loud enough for everybody to hear. But
there were 50, 60 people there.
It was
yeah. And all the other members of the board, they felt great about it. I mean, they thought it went great. So we had 3 of there. Any other comments on what you? But we're excited, and yeah, it went really well. So, yep. Okay, I think I hit what was important for you here tonight. Okay. No, item number 10, Councilwoman Ivy, did you have a report on?
I do. I'll try to be fast.
Commissioner Whitaker.
The Landmarks Commission held their annual historic home tour. There were 5 homes open. That was the beginning of September, and they also arranged for the museum and the DUP cabin there at the church on 2nd South and 2nd East. Anyway, to be open. And 48 people bought tickets, which got us $240 toward the historic district sign that they're hoping to finish the fundraising for and put there by the well. So that's the excitement for that. It went really well, especially because there were 3 other events going on that day right here in the Bountiful Centerville area. So we thought that was great participation. The museum is doing really well. There have been several updates of excitement recently. The Parks Department has had some time on their hands and been available to do things that they can't always do in the busy season. So they've taken out the trash trees along that fence line, replaced them with the red buds and the mulberries that go along with the story of the Whitaker. They've redone the sprinkling system and been able to smooth out the ground because the trees were causing some problem, as well as where the asphalt dropped off. The museum board is working on a landscape plan with the Parks Department so that it'll be a comprehensive whole thing that's in the works. The stove that has that's there in the kitchen is going to be retrofitted so that the cook surface can be used, and that'll be a gas thing. There was money donated for that by the family, and so we're excited to see that finally come to pass. And the video is finished, and I wasn't able to go the night that they watched it, so I'm excited to buy a copy, but that won't be available till January. There were a couple of sound edits that they wanted to be sure of.
I was there. Yeah,
and how was it?
It was good.
Good. We're excited to have more of the story of Centerville out there for the public to enjoy. If you want to see the B.H. Roberts furniture, it is on display at the museum until the 25th. But the work of the Parks Department has just been outstanding. We're so excited. The upstate inside the building is not as exciting. Construction is a big deal right now, and so things that are kind of, I don't know, some donation and some being paid kind of get on the bottom of the list of contractors, and so the museum's kind of on the back burner for some of the contract work that's being done. So they're stalling a little, but excited about the progress. And the actual property line of the city along the property over here on the northeast, there had been some discrepancy about where it was, and an owner passed away, and they figured out where the actual boundary line was, and were able to do a little more gardening, and there will be a couple more landscape, garden plots next year due to that truing up of what the boundary is. And the cemetery tours will be going again on October 9th and 13th. It's a new tour, so if you haven't been there before, this is your chance. And if you have been there before, new stories. So, and that'll be the last storytelling until April. So that's all.
And I hear on that mulberry bush, that's, Bruce was telling me this morning that what, Tom Whitaker or B.H. Roberts had, he had those?
Whitaker. He had silkworms.
Silkworms, yeah.
Yep, so they actually, the red buds, the flower tastes like pepper, and they used it as a garnish to add flavoring to their salads, and then the silkworms ate the mulberry leaves. So both of those trees are historically significant.
They didn't add the silkworms to the salad?
They didn't add the silkworms to the salad. Oh,
cool story.
They're stinky. I heard that the boys would sleep outside because they didn't like the smell. I don't know.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ivy. Number 11, City Manager's Report.
3 of the matters I was going to mention, I'll just cover in an email to you. The only one I wanted to mention tonight that now still is that the Salt Lake Chamber Housing Gap Coalition, I may have mentioned this before, has asked to make a presentation to our council. They have a road show. They're taking it around to the various city councils to share this report on the housing gap, the study that's been done. They've asked for time on the October 16th meeting for that presentation. I'm assuming you're okay with that. The mayor's asked me to put that on there. I would recommend that that we invite the Planning Commission. They'll just be part of the audience. This presentation would occur in your regular meeting, but I would suggest that we invite the Planning Commission to come and hear the presentation, but they would be just members of the audience. So it's not a joint meeting.
That's the chamber coming, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're trying to go to all cities.
Right, that's correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so are you okay with that?
So when we invite them like that, as opposed to...
Well, we didn't invite, you mean the Planning Commission or the...
So when we invite them like that, the Planning Commission, is that then and I can sound like a cheapskate, and I apologize, but does that become a paid meeting because we invited them?
Oh.
Or the fact that, all the public is invited, all they got to do is come to the meeting anyway?
Well, we could just treat it as we're making them aware that that presentation's being made, and it's optional whether they come, but and in that case, I don't know how you want to treat that. We do say that if they go to training that's 2 hours, it's not a joint meeting, so they wouldn't be paid because it's a meeting. And the policy is that if they go to training of 2 hours or more, that's considered the equivalent of a meeting, and they are paid their per diem for that. That's the incentive for them to get training. So this, from my view, would not qualify for that. We just tell them this is going to be presented. I wanted you to be aware of it. It's not mandatory, but you may be interested in it.
Yeah, the tough thing is the chamber's going to all the cities throughout the state.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's issues that really any interested resident might be interested in hearing. So.
Yeah, they wanted 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
For the presentation. Okay, that's all I have. I'll tell you the rest in an email. It's just a.
Will you, unless you had it in our material, I don't know if you threw it in there, do we give them more background on the firefighter retirement issue? Or did you already give them some background on that?
Didn't you mention that?
I brought it up. Maybe they're satisfied with what I said, but, so, if
I don't have anything.
everybody's good, then you don't have to, but.
Yeah, I don't have anything further.
Thank you, Steve. Any reason for closed meeting tonight? Okay, I do not have any appointments to boards or committees or any other action. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, perfect.